Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to go over one of many, hopefully, future lessons about the Airbus. I did put out a poll on the YouTube channel seeing what you guys thought, and we're going to give this trial run. I'm going to do one lesson here on one of the element. Sir? That's Philly for you right there, baby. Oh, that was too accurate. Okay. That was too good. And we're off. The flight control unit, this magical little box here. All right, let's not worry about this guy or this guy. We're just worrying about the FCU right here. So there's some dashes, some dots, some letters, some words, some buttons. There's a lot to this. This is truly, you know, the, if you will, the mainframe of the Airbus. This is your autopilot functions, your auto thrust functions. This is where the logic ties into everything. So if you want to use your autopilot, or if you want to have dual autopilots running for an ILS coupled approach, if you want to have your auto thrust running, if you want to expedite a descent or put it into approach mode, this is everything here. Before we go into the left to right mentality of every single switch and button here, there's something you need to understand about the Airbus. There are two modes of auto flight. There is managed and there is selected. These are two very, very important mentalities before you fly the Airbus within your sim. If you don't understand managed versus selected, you will not be able to control the FCU properly. The FCU, think of it like a child. No. The FCU is like a child. If you manage the child well, bring them up, teach them very good lessons, tell them what to do in the past so they know what to do in the future, they'll do what they've been trained to do and told to do time over time again. But the other option is if you need to stop behavior that's happening, you need to pull them aside and say, listen, kid, stop doing that. I want you to do this. The FCU is very much like that mentality. So in managed mode, you are pushing the button. Remember, push to manage, pull to tell it what to do now. Manage it. So give them space, give the child space. They know what they're doing. Pull if you want it to do something right now. That is a very, very important mentality. Now, how do you know you're in managed versus selected mode? It's very, very simple. You see these dots? These dots are indicating managed mode. These dashes mean I'm managed. I'm looking to the FMGC, the Flight Management Guidance Computer, to tell me what to do. And how have you told the FMGC what to do? Well, that's where your MCDU comes in, your MCDU. You have told this thing what you want it to do. So it knows that at takeoff in the climb, it's going to be managed at 250 knots or Mach 0.61. We'll talk more about the MCDU or the MCDU in a different lesson, as there's a lot more depth to it. The three main terms you need to know for this lesson that we've spoken about is the FCU, the MCDU, and the FMGC. Those are the three that interface together. The FCU talks to the FMGC. The MCDU talks to the FMGC. The Flight Management Guidance Computer is taking in all this data and saying, you do this, I do this, you do that. And it's essentially telling every part of the automation, the overall automation system, to work together. We'll go into a much heavier system depth about the overall auto flight of the Airbus in a much different lesson. So, getting back to where we were here, we talked about managed versus selected and how that mentality works. So if I zoom in here, I know that I am in managed mode right now. So what'll happen is when I take off, it's going to go into nav mode. And that will be enunciated on your PFD in your FMA. Right here, your FMA. So the FMA is right here. It's these boxes right here at the top of the PFD. Okay? Don't worry about flight mode enunciations yet. We'll go over that in a much different video. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but you have to understand how each thing talks, right? So we get back here and we know that it's going to go into nav mode. Now, if I pull, right now I'm in X-Plane 12 in the TOLUS add-on, the 2 dots versus 1 dot. 2 dots is pull. If I pull and turn, now I'm setting the heading to what I want. Okay? But if I was in flight, in nav mode, it wouldn't be that simple. It would not be able to, I can do this all I want, but if it still had the dot, I'd still be in navigation mode. To make this a little more clear, let me quickly hop into the air here. I believe I already have a scenery file for it. So nothing exciting's happening right now, right? We're just flying along. We're speed out and heading. Okay, so let's look at our FCU. Our speed is selected, there's no dot. So speed is selected, heading is selected, and altitude, we're right now just at 3,000 feet. Autopilot 2 is on, auto thrust is enabled. So when we take a look here, anything I do here, I'm selecting a heading, it'll do whatever I want. Cool. If I want to speed up the airplane, plane will speed up. I want to slow it down, it'll slow down. Now, these two are just in selected mode. What if I wanted to go into managed mode? Well, remember the analogy about the child. I'm going to give the airplane control of the speed. I'm going to say, you be okay, little Johnny. You can do it. So I push. Now the plane is going to speed up to what's called green dot. We'll talk about green dot and the speed scale and understanding what everything is in a different lesson. But now it's going to speed up to green dot right now. And it's just going to manage at roughly 215, 217 knots until something else happens, because it is in the approach mode. I've activated the approach phase already within the MCDU to tell the FMGC, okay, I'm going into an approach. I need you to be ready to slow the airplane down to V approach speed, which it knows what to do. But I'm still in heading mode. All right, so if I wanted to vector myself around, I can do that. But then all of a sudden air traffic control says, oh no, this isn't going to work out. I need you to fly direct to something. So I go in here and I say, okay, you want direct Martin? No problem, direct to insert. Now I have said through the MCDU to the FMGC, no more heading mode. I need to go direct to this fix. Okay, you need to go direct to the fix. I'm going to put you into nav mode. We see on the PFD, nav has now appeared. We see in the FCU, there's no longer any heading. That's because we have reverted to nav mode, where we are saying, you take control. You are managing the problem now. And then air traffic control says, oh no, there's traffic. Oh, there's a big Cessna. He's getting in the way. Those stupid VFR guys. Pull heading and turn. Okay, I'm not going direct Martin anymore. Now I'm saying, stop your turn. Go back to 027. That is the mentality of managed versus selected. Selected, I'm doing it. Managed, you're doing it. Remember, push for managed, pull for selected. Now we're flying around at 3,000 feet, 360 heading. Let's take a look here at this button right here, LOC. Okay? LOC is for localizer. I'm sure you guys have gotten a clearance maybe once or twice where you've been told to intercept the localizer or join the localizer. But you're not cleared for the approach yet. They're saying laterally you can join the localizer, but you cannot descend. So by resetting this scenario here, I'll reset it, and we're here on the vectors again. And I'll just turn us to a 360 heading, and we can see our approach course is right here off of Martin. So I'm just going to do this 360 and I'm going to come in a little faster because I want the plane to speed up for this example. Okay, welcome back. That was magic of editing. Turn left heading 300, intercept the localizer. Press LOC. Now, what we can see here on our PFD is we are in heading with LOC blue. LOC means it's armed. It will capture it once it sees it. Make sure LS is on, otherwise it ain't going to do anything. LOC star. LOC star means it is now in the process of intercepting the localizer, and then it will change to LOC. So now all it's going to do is continue flying this localizer course the entire time. It's going to just keep flying and flying and flying and do nothing else. It is strictly based off the radio frequency of 108.95, which is the localizer frequency. It will do nothing else. And to prove that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you just watch how it's going to blow straight through the glide slope. So in theory, we should be on the glide slope now. It's not going to do that because you've told it, all I want is localizer. That's all I've been told to do. Okay, there goes the glide slope. It's going to just keep flying the lateral course, and it's staying in altitude hold mode. It's just going to stay at 3,000 otherwise. That is the mentality of the LOC button. Okay, coming back around here, I've reset us again, and I'm just going to give us a vector towards the localizer course again, so that's 360. We've talked about managed speed already. I will put it back into managed mode because that'll just give me green dot. Speed Mach, it's a very simple button. If you want to switch between speed and Mach manually, you can do that. You're not going to use that button as often as you think, so that's all it does. It's a mode button. It tells you if you're operating in speed or Mach. Now, if we look over here, this one you will use more often if you are shooting a localizer approach. We talked about the localizer button. What does this button do? This heading track VS FPA. So you'll see track FPA versus heading vertical speed. What's the difference? Well, track FPA is now saying, you'll notice that the enunciation on the PFD changes to what we like to call the bird. And I'm not talking about this bird. The bird here is, it looks like a little birdie. And what it's doing is it's telling you what it's tracking. So across the ground, what are you tracking? 003. Even though you are flying a heading of 360, you are tracking across the ground. So track FPA is slightly different. So if I'm given, turn left heading 300, maintain 3000 until established on the localizer, clear to localizer runway 27 right approach. At that point, I'm going to press LOC track FPA. And LS button, because otherwise it ain't going to do anything. The LS button should already be on. I keep forgetting that the profile doesn't have the LS button on yet. So now we're in this track FPA mode. Okay, FPA stands for flight path angle. What flight path angle does is it's exactly as I say. You'll notice if I want to descend at 5 degrees and pull, again, selecting, I'm now selecting it to descend at a flight path angle of 5 degrees. If I want to change that flight path angle to something less, maybe 3 degrees, I can do so. Now what you'll notice is with this flight path angle, these two work together. And what does that mean, Joe? They work together. It means that once the altitude I've pre-selected in the FCU is reached, it's going to capture the altitude at a flight path angle of 3 degrees. So see alt now, and it's going to capture the altitude and maintain it once again. And then if I want to pull again and tell it to go down at 3 degrees, it's going to do that. Now, if the altitude is higher than the flight path angle, it's not going to capture anything. It'll just keep going, which is useful, especially if you have to set a missed approach altitude. It'll just keep going and never capture anything. All right, so you guys have now learned how heading track works versus, heading vertical speed versus track FPA. We just went over track FPA. Heading vertical speed, very similar. We already know what heading does, right, guys? So heading versus track, we know that. The vertical speed is exactly what I say it is. Vertical speed, 1,500 feet per minute, 1,000 feet per minute, 2,000 feet per minute, and it's going to tell the plane just to pitch for it. A very, very, very important mentality about vertical speed mode. If you have vertical speed mode enabled, it will ignore the speed constraint. It will take vertical speed as priority. Look here. We are just climbing in speed and no longer obeying this. So we are just going to keep going down at a vertical speed of 3,000 feet per minute towards this nice little neighborhood, and it is not going to slow the plane down. We are now doing 250 knots at 1,500 feet. And it's going to keep going. I can do this all I want till I'm blue in the face. I can try to manage it and do whatever I want, and it will ignore it. Pull up. Pull up. So I just want to demonstrate one more thing to you guys before I move on. I know I'm hitting you with a lot of information here, but another thing to think about is the Airbus is a very smart airplane. And in another lesson, we're going to go into the more in-depth things about the laws of Airbus. The one you'll 99% of the time being operating in is normal law, which is where you have all these bank protections, speed protections, everything. As an example of normal law, let's go back into this configuration where we know if I put vertical speed or if I had a flight path angle set, it will now ignore the speed. And let's say that I had flaps 1 in. What's going to happen here is it's not going to allow itself to overspeed the flaps. Once it reaches the speed limit, it's going to go click, click, click like you just heard, and it's going to stop. It's not going to allow you to purposely overspeed. So it's just going to hang out here until something changes. It's saying, I'll keep descending, but heads up, I can't do what you want me to do anymore. The only way for it to then resume this vertical speed of minus 3,000 feet per minute would be if I retract the flaps. Now what you'll notice, it stops blinking and it starts pitching down. You want to keep going? I'll keep going. Sounds good. So we just talked about the vertical speed and how it's limited by the protections of normal law and it ignores the speed. The other one, unlike every other button here with the manage selected, this one, if you push it, it will level off. There's no vertical angle of management. So if you were in a descent, let's say here, of 1,300 feet per minute, and all of a sudden you need to level off for one reason or another and you pushed, it's going to set it to 0, the plane will pitch up, and it's going to level off. That's what it's going to do. That's what the level off is. Now, you don't have an altitude captured at all. It's still in vertical speed mode, but you've leveled off. That's what the push button does. Now, the most common way of climbing and descending is with the altitude knob, okay? So the altitude knob has 2 modes, managed, selected, as we know. If it's managed, it's going to look at the FMGC and the data that the MCDU has been inputted with, and it's going to say, okay, do I have any altitude constraints, also known as an alt constraint? Do I have any alt constraints, perhaps on a SID or a star? It will know to obey those. So if you set a bottom altitude of 3,000 feet and you're at 20,000 feet and there are a couple of altitude restrictions, let's say 17,000 and 13,000, it's going to create a profile to keep the plane obeying those speed restrictions the entire time. Versus the other mode, which is if you pull, is open descent. The open descent is restricted by the speed that is either managed or selected. So if I manage this and go back to green dot, and I say I want to descend to 1,000 feet, when I pull for open descent, it is going to pitch the airplane down as far as possible so that it can get the best rate of descent for me, but it will be speed restricted. So let's see that in action here. I've pulled for open descent. And I look at my PFD, I see open descent and heading. This is actually probably better if I do it this way and put it right here. I don't know why I didn't do that before, guys. So we're here in an open descent going down to 1,000. And we see that we're restricted by green dot speed right now because we're managed. If I select speed and all of a sudden air traffic control says slow to 180 knots for me. I now slow to 180. Watch my VSI. It's now going to shallow because it realizes, oh, I have a speed restriction. I can't descend anymore until the plane slows down. So I start deploying flaps because I'm slowing down the airplane. That's going to increase drag. That'll get me eventually to the 180 degree mark, right? Maybe I'll put in some speed brakes. If I put in some speed brakes, that's got to slow down the airplane, right, guys? So the plane's now slowing, and the rate of descent, it'll still keep a shallow descent going on as you're slowing down, but it's not going to give you the same rate that you were getting before. Because again, it is communicating with the speed restriction that has been set. Open descent and open climb is restricted by speed. So the same mentality works. Let's say that I wanted a level off here of 1,600 feet. And flaps too. Now it's going to level off here at 1,600 feet in a moment. And there it goes. It realizes, oh, I can speed up now. Speed out start. It's going to capture the altitude. Thrust is going to increase. And that also is a factor that it takes in. If it's at thrust idle and the speed's restricted, it knows it can't do anything else. It's trying to slow it down with the auto thrust, but it can't do anything else. So auto thrust is also communicating with this logic. So if I wanted to climb, let's say, to 3,000 feet, and let's say I'm just cleaning up the airplane for one reason or another, I'm going to set it to 230 knots. If I'm speeding up to 230, and all of a sudden I say I want to climb to 5,000 feet, open climb. So I set 5 and climb, thrust climb, open climb, 5,000. Now the plane is going to speed up to 230 knots, and that's what it's going to be restricted by. So it's noticing, oh, okay, I can pitch up more. I can now get 3,500 feet because my speed, I have to obey 230 knots so I can go slower. So what happens is the slower you're going, the faster your climb rate. The faster you're going, the slower your climb rate. If ATC says I need 250 knots and I set it to 250, watch what happens to the VSI. The VSI now shallows. Why? Because I need the plane to speed up. Speed takes priority over the rate of descent when you're using the open descent or open climb. Versus, as we discussed, vertical speed and flight path angle, it's going to ignore the speed constraint. Now, I don't have any example right now that I can really show you. Well, I could. Let me set something up here. All right, so I've loaded up the score 5 departure here. I've respawned into Kennedy so I can demonstrate to you how a managed climb works where it obeys altitude restrictions. We know we have altitude restrictions because if we look at the plate here and the inset CESID, which because we're transitioning Yankee, at or above 2,500 feet, it has to obey. So what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that we obey that crossing restriction. And to see that plainly, let's see if I go into plan view and I pop this open. Wish I could make that a little bigger, but that's okay. That's what she said. Turn that off and that off. I don't need either of those. I do need constraints on though. All right, so if I cycle quickly through this, I will pop this open, move over to here, and we can watch as I cycle through this. Flight plan. So there's score, and then there's CESID, or CSED, or Seaside. I think that's how it's pronounced, Seaside. It makes a little more sense because it's pretty much over the shoreline, so it would be Seaside. Seaside, 2,500 plus. It knows that it has an altitude restriction of 2,500 plus. You can see it right here in the vertical revision. So it knows it's going to have to do that. And it already knows there's a climb speed limit of 250 below 10. So it's not going to exceed that speed. So out constraint, it will obey that no matter what. So that I just wanted you guys to see what that looks like, and then we'll just do a quick takeoff in managed mode. So you can see climb and nav are armed with auto brake max for takeoff. So I'll quickly just do a takeoff out of here, and we're going to watch how that works. Autopilot 2, and we're climbing out. Now the only altitude restriction for this is Seaside at 2,500. So it will ensure that it's going to cross seaside at or above 2,500 feet. That's all it cares about. And lever climb. I need to see a positive trend. There it is. Thrust climb, climb auto thrust. And it's just going to continue flying the entire path up to 5,000 feet, but it knows I have to get above seaside at or above 2,500 feet. So if I increase the range, it'll actually tell me this little blue line here. It's kind of hard to see. Maybe I can get it in a better angle. This blue line is telling me you're going to reach 5,000 feet by this blue line. So obviously 5,000 is well above 2,500. So that's no problem. That's it, guys. That's what managed vertical guidance is. Okay, so we just went over all the vertical and lateral guidances. A few things I didn't cover. AP 1 and 2, very self-explanatory. You're flying in the left seat, use autopilot 1. Flying in the right seat, use autopilot 2. If you're shooting an ILS, turn both on, which is typically approach, and then the other autopilot that's off. So you have dual autopilot backup in case of failure. We can talk about that logic in another lesson. ATHRA is auto thrust on and off. Again, auto thrust is the Airbus's way of managing thrust the entire flight. Auto thrust is a very, very key component of some of the protections within normal law as well. Again, talk more about it when we get into laws of Airbus. Expedite button is pretty self-explanatory. Do it faster. Climb or descent in open mode, so selected. So just to show you what Expedite looks like, I will respawn us. So we're climbing out, everything's great, right? And for some reason I get a vector, right? Flight 1234, turn left heading 210. All right, so I pull heading 210, I set it. Automatically, as I do that, I'm no longer in a managed climb mode. Why? Because I can't. I can't manage anything. There's nothing to manage, right? Let me set the thrust levers to thrust, climb, auto thrust. So I'm now in open climb because there's nothing to manage. There's no restrictions to manage anymore. So it'll revert automatically to open climb. Now, they say climb, maintain 10,000, 10,000, give me your best rate. Okay, 10,000, 10,000 best rate. Sounds good. I pull, just to reconfirm as a habit, 10,000, even though I'm already in open climb. It's just a habit that I've always done. And I click Expedite. Now it's going to say Expedite climb. Look what happens to our pitch. It severely increases. Why is it increasing? Because I said Expedite. I need you to do it faster. So it'll do it faster because it can. It is still restricted by a managed speed, though. Expedite climb is only available in managed speed mode. How do I know this? If I reload this score 5 departure, shut up. You're not going to sync. You're fine. Shut up. And I do that exact same method, right? So let's say that I turn the heading and I pre-select the heading. It's still in nav mode, and then I pull. So now I am going to be turning to a heading, pulling back to lever climb, cleaning up the airplane as we always do. And then let's say that I've been speed restricted for some reason, right? All right, so let's say that for some reason air traffic control said 210 on the speed. So I select 210, I pull it in 210. And I'm still increasing speed, everything's good and fine. Then they say, give me your best rate of climb to 10. Okay, so I set 10,000 feet. I'm already in open climb mode. And then I press Expedite. Look what happens to the speed. The speed is now going to be managed. What's it managed by, though? We don't know, right? Well, we can see here that our managed speed is 218. But I can't climb in expedited mode without being in managed speed mode. What's going to happen when I pull speed? Expedite's going to be disabled. We're going to go in open climb mode. So it's important to know Expedite is only available when you are in the managed speed mode. Welcome back to the ground. We now take a look here at the final button that I don't believe I've discussed, which is the approach button. It obviously doesn't work on the ground because I'm on the ground. I'm not trying to activate the approach mode in the FCU. Essentially, that's the button you press when you are cleared for an approach. For an ILS approach, for an RNAV approach, for an RNP approach, that's the button you press. For a localizer approach, you're only pressing LOC. Approach mode will give you vertical and lateral guidance. We'll discuss the approach mode button and the mentality of it in another lesson. But I am hoping that this lesson, I know it was much longer than I anticipated, was helpful for you guys. And if it was, be sure to leave a comment below and just give me some feedback of what you guys think. And I will see you guys all in the next lesson.